Hello, everybody. It is Yafa Luria. It is Thursday, April 11th, 2024. Last week, somebody asked me, how can you tell the difference between trauma and ADHD? So I wanted to address that. Um, First of all, for those who don't know, um, there are people, reputable people, respectable people, who think that ADHD is actually trauma, a trauma response. I am of two minds about that, pro and con, that idea, for a variety of reasons, one of which is that somebody that I respect thinks that. So that's tricky. Um, the other thing is that trauma responses or ADHD behavior can look like a trauma response. ADHD behavior can also look like a bunch of other things, like um, not being able to see correctly, needing glasses. It could be misinterpreted as, or not misinterpreted, it could actually be a hormonal issue for boys or for girls, that the hormones are out of balance. There are a variety of things that look like ADHD. So, for me, uh, here's how I distinguish ADHD from these other things. Now, I am not a diagnostician. I don't diagnose um, ever. I I don't consider myself an expert, and because I know that there are other things that look like ADHD, when people say, "Well, obviously it's ADHD," it's like, how do you know? Are you their doctor? The other thing is that a lot of people, you can go to your doctor or take your child to their pediatrician and say, I think I have ADHD, or I think my child has ADHD. Usually it's can't sit still, can't get tasks completed. My home is a mess. I keep getting fired from jobs. Uh, they're failing in class, even though they're super smart. So it's all of these negative ideas, bear with me, that make people think that they have ADHD or that their child has ADHD. And in many circumstances, based on the observations of parents or self-observation, because there is no blood test, well, there is a test for ADHD, sort of. If you test the brain chemicals, you can see which chemicals are deficient. But that can also be in other situations like trauma. But there's no specific way to diagnose ADHD yet beyond observation. So because of that, doctors will often say, well, why don't you try this medication and we'll see what happens. And then there are different responses to the medication, like I feel like a zombie is super common. A medication that matches you or your child should feel like a better version of yourself, like a part of you that you suspected was missing was put back in place. That's a good fit as far as medication. Uh, any stimulant, most stimulants will often have the side effect of eating up your everything. And so you could not have ADHD, take a stimulant, and get more done. It's not necessarily the speed that you're getting it done as much as the efficiency. And the lack of confusion as far as ADHD medication. Now, people who have experienced trauma, all kinds of people have experienced trauma. It's not, it does change your brain, but that doesn't necessarily make you automatically neurodivergent. I believe that everybody is neurodiverse, and I distinguish between diverse and divergent. Because anything that has happened to you, or, well, not that it's happened to you, but like any condition, disease that you've been through, or you have a condition that's chronic, you're going to have a different brain than I do, or than somebody else does, some random person. Brains are diverse. So saying that someone is neurodiverse is not quite accurate. Somebody who has experienced trauma may be neurotypical most of the time, but they have but they can be triggered, or their trauma can be triggered, which then shifts their thinking into something different, but not necessarily neurodivergent, meaning divergent to me means that you don't think of the way people think, you don't process information the way people do, and you don't generate information the way other people do. That is usually just isolated to a behavior component. You don't, that person, you or your child, doesn't process information the same way. In my opinion, ADHD is more than that. It's also how you generate information. People with ADHD tend to take in information literally. So a good rule of thumb is, if you want something done, be very specific and very simple and minimal in how you explain or how you write down the instructions. A lot of times parents tell me, my child can't do dishes right. And they say, have you taught them the way they want it done, the way you want it done, and have you left instructions, and have you stood with them as they're washing dishes to help them out? Well, no, it's their chore. Why should I help them out? It's not that hard. Well, it is if you take in information. If you and your child take in information differently, then it isn't straightforward for your child. And I should say, people with ADHD tend also to generate information or generate ideas that are more metaphorical. You can be, a civil engineer, electrical engineer, rocket scientist, I suppose, and have ADHD. But you probably need medication or some sort of um, intervention that addresses the ADHD because um, you have to concentrate a lot. And sciences tend not to be as metaphorical as other fields. So, if I see somebody who's diagnosed with, if I see a student who's diagnosed with ADHD, my job is to find the spark, that metaphorical thinking. I want to encourage that. I want to know that that's there. To me, that's a confirmation of ADHD, personally. It's not easy to explain it except by example. So let me give you some examples. I know this video today is a little bit longer, but I think the examples might help. I had a client, sweet girl, not a behavior problem, except that she was enthusiastic about learning. She was diagnosed with ADHD. She came, the parents brought their child to me because the child was feeling different than other people, which, I mean, that happens when you have ADHD because you're neurodivergent and you don't take in information the same way, you don't process it once it's in your head, and you don't generate it the same way as other people. So the assignment, her school assignment, was one day she came to a session with me, and her school assignment was to write an autobiography. And she wrote an autobiography, just like everybody else, except she wrote it as if she were a sheep, the animal, a sheep. And I thought that was brilliant, but the teacher did not think it was very brilliant. What they wanted was a autobiography of a human, namely that girl. When I was applying to one grad school program, one of the times that I got, this was when I got my master's in education. I had been taking some classes at the school, just not in the master's program, but just these couple of classes just looked really cool. They were education classes, and eventually I got admitted and got my master's in education there. So I knew a bunch of the people there because I had taken a few classes. So you have to write a personal statement when you're getting into a college or when you're applying for college. So I thought, I'm going to write a personal statement that is me, very me. And so what I did was take a lot of quotes, poems, pieces of like paragraphs or a few sentences from novels, and that I resonated with, and I arranged them in what felt like what was chronological order according to how my life unfolded. So when I got to the part where I became a teacher, a lot of the quotes were about education and like the essence of teaching. For example, I was so proud of this. People were saying they might not accept it. And I thought, why? It's brilliant. And it was just really, really cool. I was really proud of my brain. I love having an ADHD brain about 90% of the time. And if you've heard my video on rejection sensitive dysphoria, that's the other 10%. I do not like having rejection sensitive dysphoria. Anyway, I turned in my essay along with my application to the school, and I was called into the dean's office and told that this is not, it was super seriously, not friendly at all. This is not a personal statement, and I needed to rewrite this as what now we would call a typical personal statement. At the time, people were using the word normal more, but now we look at what's normal. We don't know what's normal. So I thought, great, okay, I can do that. I'm disappointed that they didn't see how brilliant my presentation was, but I will write the autobiography that they want, and it will be really good. And so I did, and I got into the school, as I've said, and I got a master's, eventually a master's in education. But the point of these examples is that somebody could be diagnosed with ADHD solely based on their behavior in certain situations, not based on who they are at their best or at their core or essence. And to me, there has to be that spark. That's how I distinguish somebody with ADHD from other people. And that spark is often not acceptable on some level. It's misunderstood as deficient, defective, inadequate, unprepared, not capable. And so that spark stands out. I'll just tell you one more story. I had the client diagnosed with ADHD, and he wouldn't do work in school. Usually to me, that's a sign of something more like depression or anxiety, but it could, those two things accompany ADHD a lot. So he was reading in their class, they were reading the Odyssey by Homer, which I thought was difficult to read and kind of not super interesting. Although when I was younger, I did enjoy it. Okay, so now the teacher assigns an essay about heroes. This is a high school student. Who is your hero? What makes a hero? And then give examples of heroic deeds from heroes in your life. That's it in a nutshell. So we're talking about how to organize the essay and everything. And he says, I don't think people should have heroes. I don't think heroes are a good thing. And I was like, okay, tell me more. That's a spark to me. Somebody who is not just willing to go there, but can't help but go there, meaning it's natural for them to look at something from a different point of view. I was thrilled that he was getting work done, and I said, you can write that, you just need to just like in other essays of literature, for instance, you need to cite examples to prove your point. So he started doing that, and I was at his house, and his dad walked by and said, "How are you two doing?" And I said, "Great." I forget this kid's name, but I always refer to him as Matthew. Matthew came up with the most amazing idea. And I told him the idea, and the father paused and said, "Well, I don't agree with that at all." And I was like, "Oh, like, don't shoot down your kid's idea just because they think differently than you do." As a parent, if it's not affecting their health or safety, if it's not illegal, let them run with it. That's what I feel. So somebody who has experienced, anybody can experience trauma. Anybody can experience something that changes their brain. How I distinguish trauma from ADHD is not because of the hand moving, not because of body movements, and not because of not being able to sit still, and not because of not being able to listen or thinking, just constantly going this. I look at the most positive part of ADHD because that's ADHD to me. That's the part I focus on when I'm coaching, is the best parts of ADHD. And there is this creativity, but it's not just creativity. It's like this, literally, I mean, not literally, but it feels like you're not looking at something straight on, you're looking at something diagonally, or your child isn't looking at the obvious, they're looking at it in a skewed way that we think of as bad, but it may just be that spark. I know this was a long video. I hope this is very helpful. If you want to reach me, my website is ADHDparentingbreakthrough.com, and I will put information below about my email address, my website, how to subscribe to my twice monthly e-zine, and how you can also schedule a free exploratory call with me, get some questions answered, find out more about coaching, find out what your next step is, which is not the same as everybody else's. I definitely work with people in a customized way. Okay, terrific. Thank you all. This is Yafa Luria with ADHD Parenting Breakthrough, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.